credit cards that are just shoved down our throats.
You got to explain the whole credit card thing. We just had a conversation about credit card. You were saying that if you have a credit card, the government pretty much controls you already.
Yeah, you're a slave. Slavery didn't end. Slavery ended about as much as the Roman Empire ended, right? It changed. I don't have to own you, but I can control you. And how do I do that? I assign you a number, and that number has a credit score attached to it. And then I say, based off of this number, I can tell you what you are allowed to purchase or not purchase. I can tell you that you can or you cannot own property.
What's good, real family? It's your boy TravTheRealist from Real Ass Conversations, and I have a brand new episode. This episode number 51 is going to be a little bit different than my old episodes because it's going to be more about history and things that we're going through right now outside of relationships and small things like that. So I have a good guest with me. He's a friend, he's a work colleague, and whether he knows it or not, he is a mentor to me as well. I'm going to pass it over to my boy Mike. I'll let him introduce himself.
What's up? It's Michael. I'm here.
Yes, he is here. And me and Michael, we always have very deep conversations. Good conversations. And it doesn't be the normal conversation that I have with a lot of my friends. So I wanted to bring him on so we can like dig into some different topics that I find interesting. And I think he actually find interesting as well. One thing we were talking about earlier was ancient Egyptian times and pretty much the technology during that time period, whether we believe the Egyptians at that time period actually built the pyramids or maybe there was another force outside of there.
Yeah, there's a lot of theories, right?
There is a lot of theories, but I want to know, what is your initial thought? Do you believe that the pyramids was made by normal ancient people from that time? Was it from a actual more advanced civilization before that time, or maybe it was by aliens?
I don't think it was by aliens. Like I don't think that. To be honest, like I don't know. I think the most intriguing thing about ancient Egypt is that there's so many mysteries to it. There's so many different like thought processes. There's so many different theories. You can line up, 20 different experts and have them give 20 different explanations, and not one of them are probably even going to have 20 similarities. It's all over the place. I think it's really interesting, the architecture of it. I think one thing for sure, whether it was the Egyptians or a different civilization before them, whether they're 4,500 years old or 45,000 years old, like whatever it is, they were utilizing a level of like technology and knowledge of our solar system, and not just the solar system, but like the Earth in itself, right? That like we did not possess up until like the last couple hundred years.
And that is so crazy because I caught on to that too in a video where he was saying people back in that time, they had more cosmic knowledge when it comes to the stars and how the Earth actually worked, and it actually helped them create a lot of their education when it comes to knowing time and where they was at. And for them to have that wherewithal, I feel like it had to come from some ancient knowledge. You can't just look at them in the stars and be like, all right, I can kind of see where we at in time.
I don't know if it's necessarily, I think you can play around with the term ancient, right? I mean, everything to us feels ancient. I mean, you go talk to a kid right now, I'm ancient, right?
The 18th century was how many years ago? 200 years ago? And that seemed like forever.
But there's people who are alive today that were born in the early 1900s,
yeah.
So like when you think about it, when you really think about like history, like when I lived in Georgia, I knew people who were alive, whose grandparents fought in the Civil War. Like that's like when like we think of things as being ancient. We think of things being like super super far back in history, but in reality, when you think about like when you think about the generations, I think that like there's two completely different like trains of thought. And I think that like when you look at the timeline from like a biblical standpoint, where you have this theoretical like timeline back to creation, right? Then even then there's a lot of holes, right? Because you have these timelines of like, you can follow the timeline of like, this person was the father of this person and this person lived to be X amount of years. But like in the early days, these life expectancy, like, people were living 400, 500, 600 years.
So okay, so you saying that brings, I'm gonna let you finish your thought. Are you, because you saying that kind of brings some different things to me, because going back to the whole Egyptian conversation, I sent you a video of a podcast called Flagrant. It's of two comedians. One is called Akash and one is called Andrew Schultz. They're actually very popular when it comes to their comedy realm, but in this podcast they try to get more deeper when it comes to some of their subjects. So they did have somebody on by the name of Ben Van Kerkwick, and you said he was a roadie for who?
I know at one point he was a roadie for Metallica.
So for Metallica, and this dude like has a bunch of knowledge when it comes to Egyptian times, how pyramids was made.
Oh, like an immense amount of historical knowledge.
Like the video, I'm gonna put it in my description. The video was like legit like 3 hours. I only got through the first hour and a half, but I learned so much in that small amount of time. And he was saying about how even with the Pyramid of Giza, that's like one of the few pyramids we actually explored. He was like, a lot of pyramids we haven't explored yet. And he was just like, a lot of times people get so caught up in what they see in front of them, how the pyramid goes up, but they don't even see about what's beneath them, about how we
haven't fully excavated.
We haven't excavated to get all the information. Yeah. So he was saying a lot of people think these tombs are burial grounds for like ancient Egyptian kings, when he was just like, that's not even, there's no real evidence that shows that. So you going back to saying like, you ask a billion people that know about Egypt to explain it, you might get a million different answers.
And there's so many theories to support. And real quick, I'll say that like, I think there's a lot of conspiracy theorists out there who are very knowledgeable on, and I hate the word conspiracy theorist, and we can talk about that later, but like, there's a lot of individuals out there that will like talk about theory on Egypt. This guy literally has done his research. I mean, he had, I mean,
to even really like
nailed down like the timelines of historical facts. I mean, he's clearly an expert on the subject. I think what's interesting is that like, there is this theory, right, that it's like, oh, these were built as tombs. That's like the common theory that like, I mean, they even teach you that in school, right? But like, it doesn't make sense. I mean, the timeline that you're talking, like, some of these pharaohs that were buried in these pyramids were only in their 30s.
So, all right, you hit it right on the head. So when it comes to the structure of some of these pyramids, I looked up how long it took to make like the Pyramid of Giza, and it said it was about 20 to 27 years.
And those theories are all over the place.
Place. I saw multiple things. It's like 27 years, over 100,000 people took to actually make the Pyramid of Giza.
I think even that figure is like if you're working 24 hours a day or something.
Exactly.
Like that.
And they're saying now it took 20 years, but it was only 20,000 people. But regardless if it does take 20 years and your life expectancy is like 30 or even 40 at the max during that time, it's like, so you really are looking for the next life. Cause I guess that was important back then. I guess the tomb was the passageway for the gods, and it was also like the beginning of their afterlife, because they didn't believe that death was the end.
But like the pyramids, it's not just a couple of like random structures in the middle of the desert, right? Like the pyramids are intentionally aligned, and it's the world's oldest like gated community. I mean, it's like an HOA. I mean, they've got like these design streets that go from like one pyramid to the next. Everything is aligned. It lines up to the Sphinx. I mean, it was like
What's good, family? This episode was sponsored by the media team at New Jersey Watch Blog, New Jersey's #1 platform for entrepreneurs and independent artists. If you want to learn how to grow your audience organically, please reach out to this team at www.weonjerseywatch.com. Thank you. Let's grow together.
Resort, but I mean, it was a master planned community. I don't think that you do that preemptively the moment a pharaoh is born and say, oh, this pharaoh that we know nothing about yet is a baby, is going to get the largest pyramid because they're going to be so great. It doesn't make sense. Like it's far too preemptive and just like subjective to just say that like we're going to start building pyramids as burial sites for a pharaoh that we know nothing about yet. We know he will be pharaoh, but we don't know anything about this. We don't know how great he'll be. We don't know if he's worthy of a great pyramid. We don't even know if he'll treat us well or not. And I don't know. I mean, I guess certain like civilizations and certain cultures are far more comfortable with death than I think we are here in like Western countries. But like, do you look out every day and you see the construction of your own tomb and you go like, wow, we're making great progress, boys. Keep it up.
But don't you think the conquerors back then was way more, I wouldn't say crazy, but what they was way more intense when it comes to the worshiping of themselves? Because if you look through history,
well, I mean, the pharaohs believed they were gods.
Exactly. So you really wouldn't care if it took X amount of time for something to get done. You would just be like, I am this great. I want this to be completed. That's how I feel it would be.
I don't see it. I think whether the Egyptians built them or not, I think that the pyramids were built. I think that you also have to put into perspective the amount of time that the Egyptian, you know, like I mean that culture, that the kingdom of Egypt, I mean, was it 4,500, 5,000 years or something that we know of, right? So I mean, how many generations? I mean, like you go back that far now. I mean, we live closer to the time of Cleopatra than Cleopatra lived to the creation of the pyramids, right? So you have to think about like that scale of time. We can talk about time later if we have time, but like
that's one of the biggest
time trips me out, right? So like when you look at the scale of time, like you had these generations, right? So it's easy to say that 1,000 years, 2,000 years after the creation of the pyramids, these pharaohs then begin to go from a community leader to gods. And once they had ascended to becoming gods amongst their people, then there was only one logical solution for burial. You can't just go put a god in the ground, right? You already have these great structures that are aligned with you know the stars that align with your belief system, and you know, I think, you know, just the celestial process was far more important in those days than it is today, because it had so much to do with not just crops, right? Your life, but tides and water and seasons and everything. Your life depended on understanding like the seasons and the changing times. So I think that there was a far deeper relationship that they had with the cosmos.
And to go off of that, I don't know whether you remember, I sent you a video like a year or two ago when we first started working together. It was a Bob Lazar.
Crazy conversations.
Exactly. So it was a Bob Lazar.
Yeah, I remember.
So to give a quick synopsis, Bob Lazar, he didn't work for Area 51. I think he worked for like Area 61. I think he said that.
No, he worked for Sendeo Labs in New Mexico.
Yeah.
He would go on to base. They would fly him from that base to Area 51. So he was not supposed to be working for Area 51. He would not go to Area 51 to go to work. He would go to, it's a government contracted type facility. There's one in Albuquerque, one in...
He said the one that he was stationed in was like some old school evil, like 007 thing where it's like the base was inside of a mountain.
Yeah, he said that once he would arrive at Area 51, that you go into like basically the side of a mountain, and there was a hangar built into the mountain with technology that, from what he was aware of, did not exist.
So going off of that, he was saying that technology, it was like 7 items, 14 scientists, 2 scientists to each item. And he was saying the items were found thousands of years ago, but the technology was so advanced that nobody could comprehend it. They were just trying to comprehend it.
Yeah, he was I believe he was an engineer. He was brought in to like reverse engineer, basically, like how do we recreate
gravity. It was for gravity. So pretty much he said like the item he got was like a orb, but he said the only way it would turn on, whether you put something on top of it or below it. I forgot how he said it, but he was like he said that they couldn't really understand it yet, manipulate it.
According to him, manipulated gravity.
Because he was saying that if you can control gravity, then you have the power of God. So pretty much you can put gravity around your fighter jets. If somebody shoots at you, it just bounces off.
Gravity is the God factor. I mean, you can't even explain. Scientists can't fully explain the Big Bang Theory, because where does gravity come from? Like the Big Bang does not create gravity, but the formation of the planets is not possible without gravity. So you have this void, and out of this void there is this explosion, and then without the presence of gravity, then that's all it ever is. It's just an explosion. But it's gravity that starts to pull these particles together and create mass. And that starts to become planets, and then that starts to become solar systems, so on and so forth. Like our planet does not exist without gravity. Gravity is the God factor. Gravity is the piece that like nobody can explain. Gravity is the piece that like there's a million theories out there, most of it like scientific, but none of it is like conclusive. Like there's people out there who be like, oh yeah, no, this is the mathematical equation behind gravity, but you can't explain, you still can't explain and like bring conclusive evidence to like the existence of how did gravity exist prior, and was gravity the result of this massive explosion. And I think that's a piece of what they've tried to create in Germany, right, with the super collider, whatever that thing's called, crashing the atoms in. And there's a whole theory about that, about how we're currently living in the apocalypse right now. Like life actually ended 3 years ago when those atoms collided and like it destroyed the universe, and we're living in this kind of like a not a system generated, but almost like that space between like a deep sleep and waking up when you're still kind of dreaming, but it just doesn't make any sense. And like we're living in this kind of like non-reality reality, like as the universe has just imploded as they smashed these molecules together and essentially created like a sun that just wiped out the universe. But the idea was to create and harness the power of the sun. What is the sun? I mean, the sun is just it's just pure gravity.
Okay, so I want to finish off on each topic because you said some points where I want to get off on that too. But with the Egyptian conversation, with that different technology, do you feel like with how long this world hasn't been around, that we were more advanced at one time than we are now?
I think it's easy. I mean,
because to put it in context, like they say the world has been around for 1 billion years. If you even go back a few thousand years, it's just like the things that we discover from the past, it's just like it's almost like we've been here before. Like things are reoccurring, and to me, it's like I don't know whether it's a cycle where it's just like, all right, we go through a stone age, and then we get to a point where we're so advanced that we just that we dissipate, and then we restart all over again. To me, it's just so interesting because writing didn't come about until like I think how many years ago? I think the first book was the Book of Babylon. But that was the first like actual written piece of like literature.
I think some of our earliest writing, I believe, are Babylonian.
Yeah, from the Sumerians,
Mesopotamian.
Yeah, so the Sumerians was the first ones to write, but when I went on this journey of history, when I realized about like 75% of our history wasn't even recorded, I'm just like, how can you really understand a book if you don't have 75% of the content there?
Yeah, I mean, so much of our history, I mean, even if you look at it from like a biblical perspective, right? I mean, the entire book of Genesis was written by Moses. I mean, Moses doesn't come along until the book of Exodus, right? Moses doesn't come along until after delivering, the Israelites from 400 years of slavery. Like, there has been generations and generations, and those generations, mind you, if you go back and read, those generations were a lifespan of 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 900 years each generation. So you're talking about almost 1,000 years on some generations, and like there's a very long period of time there from the idea of creation up until like that time. So like you have this entire creation story and you have this entire early origin story that all takes place that is communicated to, Moses who writes that down. It's not active writing of like, it's not diary posts of like this happened today, or here's a historical record of the events that took place, in this month, the king of Xerxes, right? Like it's very, it is, according to like the Torah, it is like it's delivered from God to Moses, but you have all this time and we don't know, from an evolutionary standpoint, the date keeps getting pushed back further and further. Now they're saying, functional humans, not like, not like early mid species, but like humans like us today, up to 350,000 years ago. I mean, that's a long time. I mean, that means that we've really only captured something like 17% of human history. I mean, that's wild. So we really don't know. And I mean, I feel like there's always two ways of looking at when we talk about like history and talk about science, and you have like you have that biblical like religious viewpoint, which is one way of looking at it, and then you have the more like common scientific viewpoint from an evolutionary standpoint. And I think that there's a lot of gaps in both.
Okay, to get on religion, you're a religious man?
I am.
Okay, so there's something that I took out of the podcast I sent you where I kind of found it interesting, and I don't know whether I kind of made my own conspiracy theory up or anything like that, but they was talking about different age periods and about what different ages and what came about from that age period.
I found this part of the podcast to be incredibly intriguing.
To me, it was one of the most interesting things about the podcast to me.
Yeah, same.
And he was pretty much saying like today we're in the age of Pisces. The age of Pisces started at like 1 AD.
That's and why everybody's so sensitive.
Exactly, and it's supposed to end 2160. And pretty much, you know what AD means?
Well, yeah, AD historically stood for after death.
Historically stood for after death, but the actual acronyms for, I think it's called like Omnino, Domino. I forgot. Let me actually see what actually.
Or maybe that's the transliteration of it. I know the original is in Greek, I think.
So
or Latin.
So it is Latin. It actually stands for Anno Domino, and it means in the year of the Lord. So that's what AD stands for. And pretty much he was saying that this is the age of the Pisces, which is 81 to where we're at right now. So right now we're in the age of the Pisces. He was saying it's funny how people a lot of times have symbols of Jesus with a fish. The Pisces symbol is a fish. A lot of his disciples were fishermen, and he fed people bread and fish.
Yeah.
And it was just like how his symbolism correlated to what the ancient Egyptians, or not even that, or ancient civilizations took to the cosmos. It make you believe like, all right, what was was the Bible really made, not to get too deep with it, but was the Bible really made for control more so than information? Because even looking into that, I was looking into the thing where it was showing about how the Gregorian calendar.
Yeah.
And about how right now it's really 2013.
Yeah, it's a different date in Ethiopia,
yeah,
right?
In Ethiopia it's really 2013 because they didn't adapt the Gregorian calendar when the Pope when
It's
the
funny
Pope,
though. Google the date in Ethiopia and it just gives you today's date.
Oh, do?
Yeah.
Oh, I'll be seeing 2013. Well, I don't know. I have to look Google again, but pretty much
just stay away from Google.
I got you.
Yeah.
But pretty much like the Pope in like 1592, like Pope Greg VIII, he pretty much changed the calendars and pretty much moved everything up eight years. And before that, the time we was on was the Julian calendar, and pretty much what's it Julian Alexander the Great. He the one that pretty much changed time to kind of fit his time period.
Sure.
So who knows how many time or how many years we done lost? Well, we're just living off of a time period of conquerors from like millennia ago. Like,
and so much of the calendar, including the days of the week, are really pulled from pagan festivals, holidays. I mean, even so we get our English Sunday, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. That's all Norse. That comes from Norse. That comes from the Viking invasion of Britannia. When they came over, they were making constant invasions into Britain at the time, and then one day they just decided, well, why are we sailing back and forth? Let's just stay here and plant some fields. So they just stayed, and they kind of conquered. They ended up spreading and marrying people, and most of the English language today is a mix of like Gaelic and French and basically like Norwegian, like Norse. Like the THs are all Norse, but they're each one of these days you can find the root of the name of each day of our week to a Norse god.
And I don't really know too much about the months, but I do know the months mean something as well. But I saw something where we originally had like 14 months instead of just 12.
Do you know why? Do you know why we celebrate Easter on 2 different days?
I don't.
You know why it alternates?
Why?
It came down to a dispute between the Roman Catholic Church and the Irish Catholic Church. And the King of England, which essentially at that time, the powers that ruled the known world were England and the French. The French were subject to the Roman Catholic Church. The King of England was also subject to the Roman Catholic Church, but also in trying to keep his territory of Ireland happy, was also trying to, make buddies and appease the Irish Catholic Church. And they had their own dispute as to which day Easter should be celebrated. Of course, we know the origins of Easter are really just a pagan holiday, but their dispute was which day should we utilize this as an opportunity to, recognize the resurrection of Jesus Christ. And essentially the king at the time was just like, I'm done arguing with you guys. We're not going to like split the kingdom here. I mean, the Roman Catholic Church was even threatening to like dethrone the King of England, because for thousands of years, the Catholic Church essentially ran the world. They had that power. They sat kings, they removed kings. So basically what it came down to was a compromise. And they got the 2 popes together and the king, and they said, look, we're going to celebrate this year on this date, and we're going to celebrate this year on this date. And that's why we have alternating Easters.
And it's crazy to me because you talking about the Catholic Church. the Pope has had so much influence throughout history as well. I didn't realize it until like this year how much religion played a part in how different things were dictated, or even how things were even judged back in the day. And for me, it's just like, we were talking about this on Sunday. For a place that has so much secret, how did it have so much power? Like, even today, the Catholic Church doesn't have anybody that they like have to answer to. They have so much secrecy to it. Everybody that I know who even seen pictures, you can even look up pictures, or people who actually went there said that the Catholic Church is probably one of the scariest places to go to. It's like they have their own they have their own like government inside of there. It's like it's their own world. To me, the Pope scares me. Like, honestly, look at the Pope scares me. Everything about the whole ideology of what they believe in is kind of scary, from like their paintings to like what they promote. And to me, it's just like, who gave them this power? Was it the people? Was it the kings back in the day? Was it the other government systems? Like, how did they play this part?
They existed before the kings.
So they were pretty much like the people governing the towns and things before kings and conquerors came into place.
I'm going to tread softly here because I don't like talking about the Catholic Church.
Okay.
Not because it has a special place in my heart, but I
understand. I got you. You could tread lightly.
the Catholic Church. Okay. To understand the origins of the Catholic Church, you have to understand the history of Rome. The Roman Empire didn't technically fall. The Roman Empire became the Catholic Empire. I mean, it's not a coincidence, like that they reside in Rome. I mean, the Vatican is right there in the heart of what was the capital of the Roman Empire. The Roman Empire began to move from a political system to a religious system. A lot of this has to do with like Constantine, his vision, so on and so forth. He makes Christianity the national religion of Rome. So Rome goes from persecuting Christians to then making Christianity like its national religion. And then you see the formations of the Catholic Church. And what the Catholic Church does at this point is it says, okay, like Christianity is our official religion, and they take the idea of Christianity, but then they really just, they mold that into the normal day in the life of Rome, right? The Roman calendar, the Roman holidays, the Roman pagan feasts, the Roman rituals. They design their churches in the same ways that, Roman cathedrals were created. Like, it really just kind of gets blended into the culture and society. And you see this like government power start to transition into more of a belief system. And as the Roman Empire begins to kind of be dissolved and dispersed amongst, and goes from like one large power structure, and it gets split out into dozens and dozens of like principalities and kingdoms, and those start to become more independent. The basis of all of it is still the Pope. So what you really go from is like a from Caesar to the Pope. Like there is a historical transition there. There's not this like weird erased time in history where Rome just collapses. Like the market collapses, the whole place burns to the ground, and it's just darkness and despair. And then out of that, like the Roman Church, right? No, it's a transition. So before England was a power, before.
Do you think that was premeditated though? Do you think the fall of do you think all of that was? Do you think it was a coincidence, or do you think that it was planned for them to kind of swing it to a different pendulum of power?
I don't think anything in history is a coincidence.
All right, so going off of that, I was asking you earlier. I feel like life is a story. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like life is a story, and it's still being written out. So in the beginning of it all, do you feel like it was just like any old story? It was just like one entity of evil, one entity of good, or do you feel like it was legit? I hate to say it, just this one person just pretty much saying like, you know what, I'm just going to take everything for myself.
You know, man, like I told you, I don't like the term conspiracy theorist, right? Because I think that the correct term is historian. Like there's really nothing new under the sun. Like what we see, the basis of what we see in life is just it's constant repetition. It looks different, right? But it's constant repetition. And we sort of talked about this the other night. Like the term that I like is like the great controversy. From the moment of time that we know, there was this split between like the will of God and then like evil, right? Good and evil. And I think we live in this like an existence of like this controversy between like inherent evil and then the choice to do what is right. And I mean, it doesn't really matter what religion you are. You can translate that into a million different ways, but no matter who you are on this planet, I think you have to agree to the fact that there is inherent evil, and we all have the choice to do what's right. So there is this controversy between that.
Do you feel like we all have an evil part in us, or do you feel like there's an ultimate evil? Because I do feel like we all have a part in us where we might be like, all right, you might want to cut this corner. But I do feel like there was one time a point where somebody was just like, you know what, I gotta do what I have to do. I don't care whether it's the right way or the wrong way.
Mm-hmm.
I'm gonna make sure that I control something.
Yeah.
And I don't know whether that person maybe had a spiritual entity come to them and pretty much influence them, or whether it was already just in us.
Yeah.
They say we're born with sin, but they also said that Jesus Christ died for our sins. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So to me, we're all grown and we all been through life a little bit. We all know that one person who's going to do whatever to get whatever.
Yeah, we see that all the time.
And a lot of times you see that they get the results faster than the person that goes do it the correct way.
Yeah, and I think we're seeing that perpetuating itself. I think we're seeing like the decline of morality. You know, I think that nothing that you see in the world today should really be a surprise if you've read the Bible. Like if you get to the back of it, you kind of know how the story ends, right? So I don't think that anything should be a surprise. I think that we're seeing things that have probably existed for a long time now coming to light, that like some people are still wanting to deny, some people are waking up to, some people are seeing around them. And I think that we are seeing like a decay, and and again, this is not the first time. If you go through history, there is these moments in history that are just dark. I mean, like it makes you really wonder about humanity and like, how did we even make it? Right. And then you see these moments of renaissance, and then you see these like moral declines, and it's almost like the center of balance becomes further and further, right? Further and further. Like every single time the bottom drops out, it drops out a little more. And it's almost like we're getting to this point now where it's like it's flatlining. Like there's no more highs. I mean, we haven't had a high since 2019. I mean, like it's every week. You know, when we were kids, there was some kind of world disaster that happened every couple of years, maybe every year. It's every week, you know, something like it's perpetuating.
But do you feel like that because there's more cameras now and then more people have access to showing it?
I think it's part of it. But I mean, there was cameras 20 years ago, and there wasn't earthquakes every week that were leveling cities
that we know of. I mean, let's go off of that. The only reason I say that is because I feel like we talked about it before. Ignorance is bliss.
Sure.
And if you only have a certain amount of stations or like news networks, a lot of times I saw somewhere it was like, you know, say something happened in in Massachusetts, like the next town over might not know until like 2 or 3 weeks later, until like the actual news came out.
That's true. I wonder though. I guess I wonder how much the camera. I mean, I personally, I believe like social media is like the core of moral decay globally, right? But like, so maybe you're correct on that. Maybe the camera does have the access to the camera does play a point in that. But like before cameras, like, do you remember situations where like somebody was being harmed in some way, and people nowadays, everyone just pulls their phone out and they stand there and they record it while somebody's murdered, right? Like, did that happen prior to the camera, or like do you feel like people were more involved, or they also just kind of stood there and watched things
I
happen?
can say maybe parents were more involved.
Yeah.
But I'm 30. Growing up, even before cameras, say something was devastating to happen, a lot of times people would just stand around and watch, because they were more entertained by the chaos of it all, or they panicked and didn't know what to do in the situation.
Yeah, I mean, I understand that too.
You might get one person that might step out and be like, "Hey, call somebody."
Yeah,
but I don't think that always was the case. I always felt like people were selfish creatures, and it's almost like 9 times out of 10, if it's not affecting you, you're going to kind of walk past it. It's almost like you see like a car on a road that's broken down. You're not going to stop not everybody going to stop. You might get one person that might stop or
not
ask
days,
for help.
Right?
You know what I'm saying? But I feel like people are innately selfish, and I do feel like when I do meet people who are like, all right, I want to help the world, I'm just like, you're a gem, because it's rare to find out.
I do think some of that's fear based. I think we live in like the media it's fear based propaganda. I think that we live in a society that's based off of fear. Racial tension is based off of fear. It's fear of what you don't understand, right? I mean, I grew up in a really rough neighborhood. So I mean, like seeing somebody get stomped out in front of you, like, no, I didn't pull my camera phone, but I also know like I know that these guys here are affiliated. I don't know what that guy did, but I'm not going to get killed trying to save him.
Yeah.
Right. And so, yeah, I think some of it's fear based. Sometimes we don't stand up and do the right thing because inherently there is an ego in all of us that is inherently concerned about self-preservation.
Survival.
Right. But does that get in the way of like, does that get in the way of morality? I guess can morality exist with ego and self-preservation?
It can't. So I'm a real proponent, and like I believe like ego is like the downfall of humanity. I feel like if we didn't have ego, we wouldn't want to have to impress anybody. We wouldn't have to like impress ourselves or have any doubts in ourselves. I really do feel like ego comes from like inner doubt.
Yeah.
And you kind of want to show out to be like, hey, like I don't have any flaws in me kind of thing. You never did anything. I know you never did no psychedelics or anything like that.
No, I'm if you knew what went on in my head, bro, like,
and that's what I'm saying. Like it's crazy because
I don't need to be opening up any more doors.
No, I understand, and this is go a little deeper into it with the whole psychedelic thing. I know a lot of people say they take psychedelics so they can have an ego death, and the ego death is pretty much something spiritual where they go through some type of cosmos where they actually see the meaning of life, and they realize the things that they really was scared of really didn't matter at all.
I don't know. Like, to me,
I want to experiment with it. I want my ego to die.
But is having an individual experience and then going on a platform to talk about it really the death of ego?
I don't think they were on a platform, but it was like a documentary I was watching. So if you make a documentary on something, it's different. I'm not saying that I'm gonna go through the experience and come on and just talk about it, but I think it's interesting where it's like the things we believe are taboo has been around for like hundreds of years. like with the, I'm trying to get the exact psychedelic, but pretty much they was saying with mushrooms.
Oh, mushrooms for sure.
Like with mushrooms, they were saying like back in
the origins of Christmas come from reindeers are hooked on mushrooms.
That's true. I don't know.
Yeah.
I grew up with Jehovah's Witness, so I really don't know.
Well, I mean, like, I didn't grow up Jehovah's Witness, but we didn't like eat mushrooms in church or anything.
I ain't know what there was like a story, but I was like, all right, where are we going with the mushrooms? But no, what the thing I was going to, they were saying like, in the 1940s, no, not the 1950s, they were saying that the mushrooms were like was like a super drug where it was like had a bunch of benefits. Whereas like if you actually had somebody like actual doctor in there with you, like going you through the experience, you can kick a lot of bad habits like cigarette smoking, anything else you might think is bad that you want to get over. And it was like pretty much you have to do it, but you got to have somebody guide you through the experience. But what started happening was, the whole hippie movement came in, and it was going more towards the peaceful side, and they wanted to promote war more. So they started like to pretty much demonize mushrooms. And that's like with anything in the world. It's like if there's a way to make money in something like as drugs affected, they're going to go against it.
Well, I mean, psychedelics have been used for, thousands of years from what we know from
it was original medicine,
different civilizations. You forgot a few steps there in terms of the 60s. That was the byproduct of LSD, which was the byproduct of CIA doing mind control experiments and mind alterations through LSD.
But that's the thing. It's like they'll make something like that, and then they'll categorize all this other stuff that's nowhere near as bad as it under it. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, oh, this is a class 1 substance or whatever like that. They did the same thing with marijuana. It was like, oh, we don't understand it. We ain't do no tests under it. No. But we're going to say it's just as bad as crack, heroin, different things like that.
Well, that's because it was a threat to big tobacco.
Exactly. Like, it's like if it goes against like something that's already been there, to me, it's just like you really have to just see what the motive is. I remember I saw that those tobacco commercials, those Dare commercials, used to be backed by alcohol companies.
I mean, what do I tell you all the time? Follow the money. If you want to know the route to anything, just follow the money. Who does it benefit?
But as we were talking before, what's more powerful, money or power?
I think the ultimate goal for many individuals in existence today is power. Money comes with power. You don't need to obtain the money. You focus on the power. Once you have the power, you have access to everything. That's the basis of socialism.
What is power?
Power is control. If I control you, I have the power over you. I possess power.
Okay, that goes into the next subject. We're talking about the Matrix. I know you're real big on the Matrix. You watched it before.
I love the Matrix. We're living in the Matrix, bro.
You say we're living in the Matrix. Why do you think we're living in the Matrix?
When I say that we're living in the Matrix, I don't mean that we're living in a simulation, right? What I mean, though, is that the things that go on around us are not by happenstance. I think there's so many things that we don't pay attention to that are happening by design that seem like a million little coincidences until they start to fall into place. And that's what I mean about like we're living in the Matrix. You can choose to be blind to it, be blind to the things around you. It's easy to write somebody off and say, "Oh, conspiracy theorist." Right? I mean, what did Elon Musk just tweet? Like, we need some more conspiracy theories because they've all come true. Like, it's history. You have to understand history, and if you understand history, then you understand that like they're not conspiracy theories. We're repeating the past. We're just repeating it in different ways and on larger scales. It all comes back to power. It all comes back to control. And that's what I mean by we are living in the Matrix. We are living in a designed system that is leading towards wide scale control.
Do you think the reason why the common person doesn't have any real power nowadays is because they don't really have a true goal or purpose?
No.
Because let me just explain why I said that real quick. We spoke before about the Matrix. If anybody's seen the Matrix trilogy, I think it was 4 that came out. That was 3 or 4.
I think that was the first 3.
So it's 3.
First were 3, yeah.
So
which the third one just gets a little weird.
Oh yeah. I'm about to say that the one I was thinking about was Animatrix, but pretty much
that was a good series.
That was good.
Yeah.
So pretty much what's so interesting when you actually get into the whole Matrix lore is that the Matrix that you see in the movie is the third Matrix. It's not the first or the second. The first
Correct.
Matrix was the Paradise Matrix, where everything was perfect. Like you didn't have to work. None of your loved ones died.
Garden of Eden.
Garden of Eden. Oh, yeah. I didn't even think of that.
Yeah. Parallels.
And it got to the point where people started thinking like, this is too good to be true. And that's interesting to me because I posted something on Facebook where it was just like, if you had an option to live in a world with no problems, no stress, no grief, but you had no real free will, would you do it? Everybody said no. I was like, but so what if the other option is you have free will, but it's total chaos?
Sure.
They said they'll take the free will even with the chaos, and for me, I think most people will take the peace.
Oh, I think people say that they would take the free will and the chaos, but I think that if you look at society, it proves otherwise.
Exactly, and it improves it even. Well, to me, I find it interesting that some people would rather have free will than peace. And that shows you how complex the human psyche is. Where it's just like, do you even know what you want?
Our society is it's the poster child for just livestock herd mentality. I mean, I've never known a time in my lifetime. I feel like we had styles and trends, but like I feel like there was still individuality. You walk outside now, everyone's wearing the same thing. I mean, an outfit comes out on TikTok and 2 days later, everyone's wearing the same item. You can't get it. It's like sold out everywhere. Everybody has it. Like we've moved into this like herd mentality where it's just like, go with the flow. Don't question it. Don't go against it. Don't be an outside. And we can get a whole nother topic here. It starts to lead into this mentality of wokeness where it starts to create these are areas that you have to focus on, and these are things that you're not allowed to talk about. But we are accepting of all things. Well, no, you're not. That's bullshit. You're not.
And before we get to that topic, to get back on the Matrix, the second Matrix was pretty much nightmare. Pretty much like everything going bad for you. That failed real quick. The system, or whatever you want to say the system is, found out
it's too bad, and people, fight against it.
If it's too good, they're gonna fight against it. So you had to find a happy medium. And
pacified.
Exactly. So the third Matrix was pretty much, they wanted to control your emotions where it can go up and down, but it's never going to be up there for too long.
Yeah.
So pretty much you're kind of like steadfast.
Yeah.
And it's interesting because in the latest Matrix, they were saying we found out we get the most energy out of people when we make them feel different emotions, like when we make them feel unstable. And that's how I feel like nowadays is. I feel like people are unstable. They're unsure in themselves. They're all over the place. The only ones that do kind of know where they at are like people who are older, who've been here for a while.
Correct. Okay. So the basis of addiction is inconsistency. And this is what Instagram algorithms are based off of. Is intentional inconsistency. So there were studies, I can't remember the name of the scientist. It was a German scientist. I think we talked about this. He put a pigeon in the booth in this box, and a light would light up. And eventually the pigeon learned that if it went and it pressed on the light, it pecked at it, then food would come out. So when the pigeon would get hungry, the pigeon would go over and it'd peck at the light. As the light would come on, food would come out, light would go off. A couple hours later to come on, walk over, peck at it, food comes out. They did this for a while. So the pigeon became accustomed to the idea of like, light comes on, I press on it, I get fed. Then what they started to do is they started to introduce inconsistency. So sometimes the light would come on, the pigeon would peck at it, and the food would come out. Sometimes it wouldn't. And the moment that started, the pigeon just never stopped. It's pecking, it's pecking, pecking. That's the algorithm of Instagram. When you're scrolling, you scroll.
But,
I like this.
But you also said that's like the format of like unemployment in the government, like being pretty much reliant on government help.
Yeah. Medicare, Medicaid, WIC, Social Security, food stamps.
And it got worse since the pandemic with the whole stimulus thing, because almost like people feel like I can do nothing and still get a reward for it.
Yeah. And okay, let me preface this. I'm a Reformed Democrat.
Okay.
I'm a Reformed Democrat. Not that I'm like a raging Republican. I'm actually more libertarian than anything. What you've seen with the Democratic Party and like financial assistance as a whole, just whatever you want to call it, whatever government assistance program, what you're seeing is that Goldilocks environment, that matrix type environment, right? It's about creating passivity. We're going to give you just enough to keep you fed, not enough to get out, right? Not enough to not too little that you starve, but just enough that you continue to vote for us. And I saw it. I mean, you know this. I was one of two white people in my neighborhood. Like I grew up in a very, very tough neighborhood in California. I had this idea of like, this is the way society works. And I saw this like perpetuation over and over and over. And I remember having friends, the ones that didn't go to jail, who were like, I got hired on at Target. And it was like, I made it. I got a job at Target. I'm like, there's got to be more than this. There's got to be more. There's got to be more than getting a job at Target and then having supplemental income come in to help with the rest of my bills. There is this reliance that is created on the government of like, vote for us, support us, and we will support you. It becomes this reciprocal reliance, and it's enablement. It is enablement. And I was telling you about that video I saw of the baby bird that had fallen out of the nest, and it's chasing this worm right through the gutter, and it catches up to the worm and it opens its mouth and it stands there, and the worm crawls away, and this bird is like frustrated, and it runs up to it again and opens its mouth and it stands there, and you've got this baby bird, and it's like doesn't understand why the worm is not jumping in its mouth, right? And I think that if you look at our society today, there has been this objective to push this agenda economically of reliance on Big Brother, reliance on the government, this created expectation that we should rely on the government, when in reality, we should not. We should not. That's not what they're there for. We should rely on ourselves. We should rely on our community. We should rely on our family. We should rely like on the individuals around us, but not on the government, right? And there is this enablement that has happened for years. And if you follow the timeline on that, it actually makes a lot of sense. Right. And it's modern day slavery is what we're dealing with right now in this world of social security numbers, of debt, of credit cards that are just shoved down our throats.
Oh, you made me forget. You got to explain the whole credit card thing. We just had a conversation about credit cards, and you was pretty much saying that if you have a credit card, the government pretty much controls you already.
Yeah, you're a slave.
Can you get a little deeper in that?
Yes, slavery didn't end. Slavery ended about as much as the Roman Empire ended, right? It changed. It changed. What do we look at today? We want to talk about like systematic racism. The basis of systematic racism is our economics. It's not capitalism. It's the idea of socialism that's like jammed down our throat that creates it. It started out intentionally. It started out directed towards certain communities. but it now encompasses all individuals, right? So I don't have to own you, but I can control you. And how do I do that? I assign you a number, and that number has a credit score attached to it. And then I say, based off of this number, I can tell you what you are allowed to purchase or not purchase. I can tell you that you can or you cannot own property.
And my argument to you this weekend was, what if I take out all my money and I just have this cash flow?
Sure, good for you. But you're going to have to figure out how to buy a home and land in all cash.
Yeah, that's hard. In America, or can I go to like another country?
You can go to another country. I mean, if you want to do that, bro, I encourage you, do it. Do it. Not that like America is so bad you should go to another country. I mean, Winston Churchill said that, democracy is the worst kind of political structure, with the exception of all the others. Right? I mean, we can sit here and complain about America has its faults, but you can look at other countries and you realize that we're really rather lucky. But there is this agenda that's pushing and running its course that is trying to grind our current economic system to a halt. And it's all based on power and control. And yes, to your point, what would happen if we all walked away?
Cause real quick, no offense, Black people, they don't like using credit cards a lot, especially from from more lower areas. You know what I'm saying? They don't believe in using credit cards. There's always say like, hey, use cash so nothing can be traced back to you. But then again, it's like if you do that, then
you have no credit score,
no real power to really
because
get
when
any
it comes
advancement in this community.
I mean, when it comes to economics, they designed it in a way where you're damned if you do, you're damned if you don't. Right? You have to play their game within the rules and expectations that they have laid out, or you don't get to go buy that car. You don't get to be a homeowner or a landowner. And it was designed that way.
And like you were saying, that the bank only will cover you up to $250K.
So the FDIC. So the FDIC, when you walk into a bank and you see the FDIC like sticker on the window, that's essentially, it's the Allstate. It's the insurance company for the banks. Not every small bank, man, we're gonna get on to one now. Not all small banks are insured by the FDIC. All major banks are, and the FDIC insures major banks more than they insure smaller community banks. But a few weeks ago, what we saw with SVB, Silicon Valley Bank, when this bank went under, the FDIC said, okay, according to our policy, we will guarantee funds up to $250,000. So if you had funds in this bank that exceeded $250,000, that's a loss. That's the policy. $250,000 and below is what is insured. Everybody applauded the Biden administration for stepping in and saying, no, we're going to guarantee everything. But they don't realize that was a control move to establish additional government control over the banking system. What they're doing right now is putting new policies in place that actually. So when all the news medias last week were talking about Trump being arrested, let me tell you this: anytime all the news medias are talking about one thing, it's the overplay for the underlay. It doesn't have to be Trump. It could be anything. I mean, a lot of people don't realize this, but there was news that broke about direct financial ties between Hunter Biden and China that happened the very same week that the government decided to come out and tell all of us the aliens were real and were shooting down UFOs. That's interesting.
Smoke and mirrors.
It's the overplay for the underlay, right? There's always something, right? So anytime every news media is talking about something, open up a VPN, go to a browser like DuckDuckGo, don't get on Google, and start looking through the news. What else is happening today? What else is going on that like I'm missing? And what we missed last week was that there was a bipartisan bill, mind you. Both Republicans and Democrats put this together. This was a bill that would limit the government's power on what they were able to invest your Social Security and 401k money into. It went to Biden's desk, and it was the first veto that he did as president. What the media tried to do is they packaged this as a anti-science, anti-climate bill. It was global warming deniers who didn't want people's 401k and Social Security money to be invested into renewable energy companies. That was just a part of it, though. It wasn't about don't put the money into renewable energy. It was about you should not have the control to determine where our money goes. It got vetoed. The government is making a very large play right now to destabilize small banks. You're going to start seeing it. I guarantee by the time that this airs, another bank will have gone under. You're going to start seeing it more and more in the next coming weeks and months. Is you're going to see these smaller banks start to collapse. And what's going to happen is that people are going to move in droves. They're going to start moving their money out of these smaller banks and going into these larger banks. And these larger banks are tied to far more government oversight and government control.
Do you think this is Biden's fault? Because for some reason on my social media, everybody is saying all of this is Biden's fault.
I would love to blame things on Biden, but to be honest, I don't think the guy honestly knows what's going on.
Me neither. I think he's just along for the ride.
I think he was the Manchurian candidate because they pump him up on medication and they just kind of like grab the loose skin on the back of his neck. And I don't think he really honestly, I don't like to even talk negatively about Joe Biden. Like my dad passed away from dementia. I think that Joe Biden is experiencing legitimate cognitive decline. I think if you watch his interviews from 10, 20 years ago, he's a different human being. I mean, I don't think it's like, I think that's why there's so many people convinced that it's not even Joe Biden. You know, some people are pointing out like, oh, his earlobes are different and all this stuff like that.
Talking about he a clone?
Yeah. He's not the same person though.
Yeah.
He's not. He's just not. And I don't think it's fair that he was even put out there. I don't think it was fair to the Democratic Party. Could have done better. I think there was a lot more. There were so many Democratic candidates out there that were more suited for the job. And it's bewildering to me that they did not get the support of the Democratic Party. So I don't think it's a mistake that he's in office, but it's hard to sit here and say like, oh, this is Joe. I think it's so far beyond the presidential seat that it's not even funny.
Do you think all these issues are like beyond the three parties that we do have? Like,
yes.
Do you think that we should create a new party maybe?
I don't unless that new party knows how to break away from the global banking system and World Banking Forum, then I don't think it matters.
What if they do? What if they have these great new minds are coming together and they're like, we have a plan in place. We just need people to back us.
And how do we do that when our government owns trillions of dollars to the banks?
That, like I said, it's a difficult conversation, but I kind of feel like it's past being Democrat Republican now.
Oh, it's so far beyond. And we were talking about, I mean, I love the analogy of the ants in the jar, right? If you put black ants and red ants in a jar and you just leave them alone, like they just go about their business. If you shake the jar up, they murder each other. And I think that everybody is so caught up right now on race and color and gender and pronouns and religion that we don't want to stop and ask the question of who's shaking the damn jar? Who's creating all this in the first place? Like
who do you think, Michael?
I'm only going to go so far on this podcast.
Let me ask you a question. Do you think the person is still alive, or do you think it's like a group?
I think there's a group of individuals.
Groups, okay.
And I think that you see that it's almost like aftershocks, right? You can use the Civil War as an example of this like earthquake of just an upset in the economic, in the political, and I mean just the very fabric of our country was divided. It was ripped apart. I don't even like the term Civil War. It really wasn't even a civil war, because you technically had these states succeed and become their own country. They had their own like capital. They had their own president. So they really became their own independent country. So it was really these two countries. America defeated the South, took the colonies back. That was a big shifting of tide. By the way, just for note, Abraham Lincoln was a Republican. The Confederacy was made up of Southern Democrats, and that was shut down. You win this war, and then there's this Confederacy that lives on in the shadows, right? And you go, well, where does it go? And then you get into the Ring of Fire. I'm not going to touch much on that.
Hold on, what is the Ring of Fire? I don't know.
Get on a VPN. get on a non-Google browser and do your research. But I think that you see these aftershocks after all this, and I think that even if you look into the CIA's involvement in the Caribbean and Central and South America in the 70s and 80s, you see these aftershocks of the agenda of the Ring of Fire. You see these aftershocks of the agenda of these like these ghost political standings. And I think that there's, you're looking it up on your phone?
On Google Duck.
Oh man.
Are you that nervous about it?
I gotta get you a Faraday bag.
All I typed in was Ring of Fire. It just showed me an area. It didn't show me too much more besides that.
Yeah, it's a geographical area.
That's pretty much all it showed me so far. So
but again, it comes down to the continuation of slavery. It comes down to money, right? And that goal has shifted over time, but it comes, money is the root of it, right? But I think that you see it in power. I think that you see it in the World Economic Forum. I think that what we went from was like obtaining political power and obtaining power amongst countries, and where we're seeing the tide shifting right now is a global power harnessed by the World Economic Forum. This is why we have endless wars. This is why wars are created, because wars cost money. Wars aren't spent out of money that's sitting around in someone's savings account. All right. The countries borrow money from the bank at a high interest rate in order to finance wars. Hitler, the Nazis, financed World War II through the banks. You want to talk about some real shit? One of the heads of the banks that they were financing from was George H. Bush's grandfather.
Crazy.
All right. It was a Bush. He owned the bank that was financing the Nazi party. The U.S. government had to go and like pull him out of his position from the bank and shut them down. It always like, look, the credit system, the credit score, but debt. And that's what it comes down to. I'm not going to say that like I'm debt free. I'm working on it. I want to be debt free. If you are in debt, you are a slave. It is modern slavery, and they don't care anymore about race. They don't care about gender. It is all encompassing.
So what if the world didn't have any credit cards, just debit cards? Would that still be an issue if we just had debit cards?
It would be now. It would be now if we never went down this scale. But you have to understand that, like, I think realistically, like 80% of like the global GDP doesn't really exist. It's just monopoly money. It's based off of debt. It's based off of the assumption that debt will be paid with interest. It's based off of the assumption that people will pay their mortgages. It's based off the assumption that governments are going to pay back the trillions of dollars they owe. It's based off of the assumption that Fort Knox actually has gold in it, right? And that's what they're doing right now. The Federal Reserve has made so many moves that are just they're devaluing the dollar. They are trying to tank cryptocurrency because the Federal Reserve has created their own cryptocurrency, and that's the end goal. That's the end goal, is to obtain government control over the banking system, and to roll out a government instituted cryptocurrency and essentially end cash as we know it. Right. So there's no more tangible money. It's all crypto. And it's tied to
didn't crypto
control.
just like crash? Like, aren't people like pulling out of crypto? I thought they like crypto had like a big crash.
The government's been trying to do everything they can to like bring down crypto. Crypto didn't crash. There was some exchanges. There was an exchange that crashed. Bitcoin definitely saw a lot of losses. It's sort of back up on the rise now. Ethereum is still doing very well. The fat of Dogecoin just plummeted, right? It went back to where it was. It's still very volatile. I think that's why a lot of like investors still like playing with it, because you can jump in and throw, $10,000 in and sell it a couple minutes later and have 20-30% returns. Volatility is where you make your money. But the government is trying very hard to bring down the cryptocurrency exchanges. They're trying to bring down these external independent cryptocurrencies because they want to roll out. It's the initiative to like a one world government and a one world economy, right? When you can move the entire world onto a global currency managed by global banks that are managed by one global power, then you can create this idea of utopia. Because at the end of the day, like, the propaganda department is just doing a stellar job, and they package everything in a way that like just makes it look like they're taking us to the Garden of Eden, and we're just all going to walk around and hand each other flowers and roses and, just walk arm in arm and the world will be at peace. No, what they're trying to drive to is like complete and utter control, right? So that the top 1% have 99% of the control and 99% of the wealth. That dystopian environment is the epitome of socialism. Look at there's never been a successful socialistic economy, but yet we have all these political individuals, unfortunately, all on the Democratic side, who are saying like, oh, socialism. Like we've got to roll this out. We've got to have, they want to. In Teen Magazine, it was 17. That's 17. Back in 2020, there was an article questioning courses to children, because that's where they do their indoctrination. Right? You start with children. Should people really have rights to own land? Are you kidding me? Right? But that's the agenda, right? What? How selfish? How capitalistic of you to own land, right? You should open up your land to everyone. And the people who say this are multimillionaires living in gated communities.
We'll give them no land, yeah.
Exactly.
Okay. A conspiracy theory of my own right now. Do you think we're the only type of humans in the world right now? And to get a little deeper on that, I was watching a podcast where they were saying humans are so, I don't want to say ignorant, but we're so full of ourselves. I feel like we're like the only type of species out there that is ourselves.
Very egotistical.
Whereas you said before, like, there's different types of ants, there's different types of mammals, sharks, dogs. There's always a different lineage out there. So what makes us think we're so different and that there's not different forms of us out there?
Well, I mean, theoretically, there is different forms, right? I mean, there's different nationalities, and I mean, people's genetic makeup is different, right? We're all humanoids, right? But like, we all look very different. I mean, individuals with certain genomes are going to have more similarities than others. Although they say that we all trace our genomes back to Central Africa, right? Is it Central or West Africa or something? Is where they believe like all human life originated. And you have the biblical version of the story of the Tower of Babel, which honestly, it kind of goes back to that conversation of ancient Egypt, is nobody really knows where this Tower of Babel was or what it looked like, right?
Hold on. Okay. You bring up so many different things. The reason I brought that up is because the conversation I was hearing on YouTube, they was talking about what they think aliens look like, whether it's like gray people, whether it's reptiles, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah.
And one of the guys was just saying, he was just like, y'all are giving like this alien theory too much power. He was like, there might just be different life forms of humans out there that you might not be aware of yet.
I honestly, I think that the alien idea is a lack of creativity.
I had one friend that said, aliens are really just angels and demons.
Certainly could be. I think that I think the bigger question is not, is there more than one mankind, but is there more than one dimension that is living and operating in our midst?
Well, they said it's so crazy now, because there's always been a saying that says, movie in Hollywood, if they start showing a certain type of genre or a certain type of movie, that means it's already been done before, or they're like on to the next plan. So you know how nowadays with superhero movies, it's all about different reality, different dimensions.
Yeah.
Everything on TV is about that. And it's almost like, are they really trying to just let us know, like, hey, there are different dimensions out there? Or
yeah, I mean, there's also no originality in Hollywood, but yeah, I mean, I think that we should probably pay a little bit more attention to the movies that come out.
Exactly. They were saying, like, honestly, the people who are controlling the future, they already probably 30, 50 years in advance already planning things out. Like, they're not going over, what we're going to do tomorrow or next week. They're thinking like decades, centuries in advance.
Well, I remember watching that movie, Children of Men. I saw it years ago when it came out. Like, that's a weird ass movie. And I watched it recently. I was like, oh, it's not that weird.
You say it's not that weird?
It's not that weird. Like time and perspective. Like, you have all these studies that are coming out right now about, of course now, all those crazy people that said, like, maybe you should do a little bit more research on the COVID vaccine before you threaten people's jobs and livelihood and the threat of taking it, putting people in jail. But now there's all these studies coming out, not just about the mitochondria with the heart, but with infertility in women and miscarriages and menstrual cycles that are just whacked. And there's these fears that, like, we won't know the true result of this for maybe years to come. But is there going to be an entire generation of children that just, like, we're already seeing right now the lowest birth rates in human history, like in recorded human history, like the lowest incline of population growth.
There was just a recall for some like strawberry soda at Kroger's, because I think it came back saying that it like reduces men infertility.
Yeah,
it's like there's some big callback for it.
Don't even start on the food supply, but you have these, this vaccine that's not tested. Well, they do some testing, they get the results, they get a judge essentially to agree to not release the results of the study for 75 years. That makes you feel safe. And now there's all these doctors coming out saying, yes, like, we're seeing blood clots, we're seeing heart issues, and we're seeing infertility. So now you have this movie where it's like set in the not so distant future where people just stop having babies. And like, and there hasn't been a baby in like 10 years.
Remember that Nestle documentary I sent you?
Oh yeah.
About how pretty much they made all this baby formula that wasn't good for babies, but they paid off all the doctors to be like, hey, this is good for your family. It help you grow strong bones. Yeah. But literally it had everything in it to pretty much hurt your child.
Well, the government said it's good.
It's crazy.
It's got the FDA's stamp of approval.
It's so crazy what we believe is good. They even said milk was good. I don't think milk's good for you no more. Before they said like milk build your bones. Oh, now it's coming back with all these studies about how bad it is for you. I haven't drunk milk in years.
I think milk is better for you than the milk alternatives that are on the shelves.
What you mean, like almond milk and stuff like that?
I'm not saying there's something wrong with with the, well, almonds don't make milk. It's almond water, but
I love it. Whatever it is, I love it.
There's nothing wrong with the almond water or the oat milk or any of it on its own. But when you pick up one of those boxes and you start to read the ingredients list, you can't pronounce half the stuff that's in it.
I mean, that could be true, but is part of that just due to being ignorant and not knowing the ingredients? Maybe they're basic ingredients.
Some of them. I mean, yeah, a lot of it's preservatives.
You want it to be like just like eggs. This you want all your stuff to be just like straight ingredients. You don't want it to be no long terminology when you
No, I don't. I mean, that's the majority of my diet. It's like grass-fed meat and organic vegetables.
When did you actually start this journey?
I went down the misguided path of veganism and vegetarianism for a while till I realized it's just even from an evolutionary standpoint, it's not solidified. Like, we need more than that. Our bodies were made for more than that. We've eaten wild game for tens of thousands of years, far longer than we've cultivated vegetables. We ate wild grains and animal meat. It's biologically more adapted to our body. When I started going down that path of really understanding what was out there, I'd say this was probably 2018, 2019. I started really getting serious about trying to understand what was in my food. Started listening to a lot of different podcasts and things about that really talked about the food source, understanding when you get salmon in a restaurant, 9 out of 10 times it's not salmon. It's
what?
It's most of the fish that you eat in restaurants is not what it's labeled as. It's like a byproduct fish that's dyed or cut and marketed as a higher end fish. So you're paying 3 times the markup rate on what essentially is just trash fish that's usually thrown out
off of a name, pretty much.
Yeah. It's like getting knockoff Jordans essentially. I mean, you're paying for the brand of fish, and it's not even that. And it really started to open my eyes to just the I mean, there's this again, it comes down to money, right? Follow the money. I mean, it's greed, and there's this hierarchy in our agricultural system. There's 3 companies that own 90% of the farms in the US. And there are the same companies that that also produce the pesticides that go on them that are causing the issues for recall. They're Roundup, which markets weed killer dandelions. Dandelions are actually for centuries were consumed by individuals as a tea. It's proven that dandelions actually can repair heart disease. They're phenomenal for your cardiovascular system, your lungs, your heart. Ironically, the company who makes Bayer aspirin, which is marketed to support heart health, is owned by the same company that owns Roundup. So isn't it ironic that the company that is selling you aspirin to support your heart health is also making the spray that kills dandelions that could do that for you on its own? So it's all very interconnected. And I mean, in a perfect world, I would only eat what I caught and killed, but I'm still a city dweller, and it's not always that feasible to do.
So with all of this knowledge, how do you sleep at night, Michael? How do you live in peace with all of this knowledge?
We talked about that. I don't always feel at peace. I mean, I do struggle with anxiety. I think it comes in waves. Sometimes looking at things, and I have this bad habit of always trying to connect the dots in every situation, and it can start to feel a little overwhelming in those times. I do think that part of the reason I have as much peace as I do is just like my relationship with God, like understanding that like it doesn't matter if I have control or not at the end of the day. Like he appoints and sits down every king, right? So like I can sit here and just have all this anxiety about things that are going on, but understanding like there is more at play than me, and that's ego. My anxiety is ego. My anxiety is me feeling like I have to have control of my environment. In reality, I don't. I just have to trust. And then outside of that too, I think it's just like that acceptance of like, yeah, like we do live in a cycle. I mean, you talked about that show. Was it Love and Robots? Death, Love and Robots?
Yeah.
That refrigerator society, right? Great episode. Even if you look at it biblically, like in the very first chapter of, or I think it's actually the third chapter of Genesis, in the creation story, second or third, after, I think it's third, because after Adam is created, then he creates Eve. God creates Eve, and he tells them, even in the original Hebrew translation, he says, "Go and repopulate the earth." What does that mean? And then when they have two sons, Cain and Abel, right? Cain kills Abel. God banishes him from the community, says, "You're going to go out and you're going to wander the lands." He pleads with God and he goes, "No, like the people out there will kill me." What people? What are you talking about? Like there's the only thing that's mentioned right now is Adam, Eve, Cain, Abel. But he is terrified to go out into the lands for the people who live out there and what they will do to him.
Do you think it was actual people, or do you think it was his fear and ego?
I think it was people. I think it was more than people. And this kind of goes back to your question of like, is there more than one kind of human? I mean, the Catholic Church took multiple books of the Bible out. They edited it. Didn't like that one. They cut it out. The Book of Enoch, right? It talks about
that doesn't bring any doubt to you at all.
In what way?
When it comes to your faith, when you know that maybe, I don't want to get too deep with this, but that they gave you a edited book, where I know that the Apocrypha was like the original Bible, where it was like had like 4 or 5 more chapters in it that was taken out because it didn't go against the actual Christian beliefs during that time period.
You've got to go back to the original Hebrew writings. I mean, the Catholic Church was anti-Semitic, right? So you got to go back to the Hebrew writings to understand, like, to get all the books.
And another question I have: do you feel like this Bible, or the Bible that we know of, was the first Bible?
Well, no.
So you think there was Bibles for other?
Well, of course, it's the first Bible because it was the first Bible. We hadn't invented books, so I mean,
that's what we're saying. Like, but we're saying like the world been around for billions a year, for a billion year. Let's say in the past like 4,500 years, or like 4,500 years, we get this Bible. You know what I'm saying? My thing is, if there is advanced civilizations before us, you don't think they had maybe some type of guidebook,
some
as
kind
well?
Of manuscript? I think it is incredibly narcissistic of us to think that like this human timeline that we can create and look back genealogically, like we can say this is when people created time. This is when people created the written language and writings and manuscripts. We are constantly proven wrong on that. I mean, you can look at the Sumerians and things like this and them creating times and calendars. And then you have these civilizations in Central America. Of course, they weren't around at the same time, but like they didn't learn from the Sumerians, right? So like these cultures were developing their own calendar systems, and in different parts of the globe, you had individuals developing their own calendar systems and times and all these things. I think it's ridiculous for us to think that this is just like recent technology, and that there was no other time in history where people had the ability to read and to write and to create stories. And I mean, most of what we know from the Bible is descended down from scrolls and writings and collections of manuscripts. So I think there's,
because I will be so paranoid if I felt like this was the only Bible. And the only reason I say that is because there's an old saying that says, if you tell a lie enough, it becomes a truth. And
sure, that we know that to be true.
Is it know that to be true? And before the Sumerians and the whole idea of writing came to be about, it was all about storytelling. It's like, I tell my story to your tribe, you pass it on to your descendants, and it goes to this tribe, and then go through all throughout time about who says like one person can't change one thing.
Yeah.
And it really deters everything off of its course.
But if I had 100% certainty through documented evidence that what I believe is what I believe, then it wouldn't be faith.
I understand where you're going with this. I feel like we each have our own religious barriers when it comes to certain things. Because to me, it's when it comes to religion, I went down this whole path with religion, and when I found out so many documents was burned out of time through different conquerors and different kings throughout time, like the Library of Alexandria, and even other institutes that promoted like knowledge back in the day. If you didn't promote what that conqueror wanted you to do, they would literally burn everything you had out of existence and make their own history up.
Yeah.
So for me, just knowing that
we lost a lot in the 30s and 40s.
Is exactly like so to me, just knowing how much history we don't know and how much has been omitted out of what we do know, it makes me feel like the information we do know isn't manufactured for a reason. With certain parts in history left there just so the course can go to where it is today. It makes you just wonder a lot when when things aren't documented or you don't have the proof. Because like we were saying before, like you have a full book, but you only got the last 2 chapters. It's like you missed the whole journey that could have had smaller gems inside of it.
Yeah, I think in a large scale we do miss a lot of the journey, right? And yeah, that's the big argument when it comes to religion is who's right, whose book is right. Is it the Torah? Is it the Bible? Is it the Quran? Like everybody who has a book and a religion, they believe obviously that theirs is correct.
Like it's interesting. Like what if somebody came out with it said, hey, I had an angel I wouldn't say possess me, but pretty much give me a vision to write this new Bible Testament. Will we even take it serious?
You're referencing the Jehovah's Witness.
No, Jehovah's Witness book is pretty much the same. We just have, well, I'm not a witness, but their belief is just that Jesus Christ isn't God. Like Jesus Christ is the Son of God. They don't believe in the Trinity. I know some places believe in the Trinity.
But the Jehovah's Witness has the, what is it, like the book? It's
not like a different book. No. We have different like things, like so we have the Bible, we also have the Watchtower, which we go off of, which is like a magazine that pretty much goes into detail of different Bible scriptures.
But wasn't part of the theology based off of a visitation from an angel?
No, that's not. That's not, or at least I'm not a witness enough to know it. But
or it's just a different interpretation.
It's a different interpretation. They pretty much just believe that only 144,000 people are going to heaven. And then
which is based off of a very confusing scripture,
off of scripture,
in the Bible, yeah.
And it pretty much that ended in 1912. I don't know how they got 1912, but apparently this mass scripture got to the point like 1912. The last people that was going to heaven was accepted during that time period. And then when the last days come about, it's not going to be like they don't believe that we're going like the people at that time is going to heaven. It's like when you die, you're in the ground until resurrection. If you was righteous, you will be resurrected into the new system in 144,000, and Jesus Christ will be king under this new paradise of earth. And they will pretty much reteach us what we should be doing as Christians, whatever you believe in. And then after a certain amount of time, they're going to re-release Satan to test us one more time. Because before, like the whole biggest thing was Satan was saying like would they like do they really trust you? Like, would they really follow you if they had another choice?
It came down to free will.
Free will. You know what I'm saying? Like if they had another choice, would they really follow you?
You can't truly love somebody if you fully control them.
And I'm not. That's a little deep. That's a little deep right there. I ain't gonna get. That's a little too far for me. But yeah, it's just interesting where it's just like with the witnesses, I feel like everybody had their own belief system. But for me, it is interesting when it just comes to there's so much stuff that we just don't know. And I feel like maybe we should have access. We should have had access to. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, I mean, I think when it comes to religion, like it is what it is. Like I guess at the end of the day, I don't really need to be right. I just want to know that like I want to know my heart was in the right place. And for me, it's more about a relationship than it is about like indoctrination or, well, okay, doctrination, but like a lot of it can be indoctrination.
This is what I asked my mom like a year or two ago, because she said something where it kind of bothered me, because I guess witnesses don't like celebrate going to weddings and different things like that.
Yeah, mind you, celebrate birthdays.
Mind you, she has been to weddings before, but one day she was like, "Hey, what if? She's like, if you got married, what if I didn't go to your wedding?" And I asked her, I said, "What if you are resurrected one day and you're like in front of God, and He tells you everything you did was wrong? How would you feel?"
Yeah.
I said, would you feel bad that you kind of distanced yourself from some of your family members for this? Or would you still just feel bad that you didn't fully do what He wanted you to do? And she was like, I'll feel bad I didn't really complete my journey with Jehovah. And to me, it's just interesting because it's just like you say, none of us really know. Like, you know what I'm saying? Like, like some people might think that their way of living is just, like in their mind, they might think it's just. But once they get to that certain point, you might be like, hey, this is not how life is supposed to be. So to me, it's like religion is it's such an interesting topic, because to me it's scary and it's also enlightening at the same time. Like, how can you have such duality?
There's so much duality. And I think that's why so many people kind of put their hands in the air and say, I'm agnostic or I'm atheist. Right? Because
I think that's lazy though. I feel like that's just lazy.
That's where I was going. I think it's easier to not play the game than sometimes it's easier to sit on the bench than to get involved. Like it's hard to say that like I feel that my viewpoint interpretation of God and His love and my relationship with Him it's based off of my faith is more right or better than yours. I think that's why at the end of the day, if the basis of whatever you believe is not founded and based in love, then it's nothing but doctrine, and abusive doctrine at that. Because if it's not based in love, then it's based on actions and works.
But what's love? You got tough love. I mean, you know.
But love is selfless. And to your point, tough love. Sometimes love can look like accountability. Sometimes love can look like being the only person in someone's life who's willing to give them difficult feedback and to hold them accountable and say, you're better than that, and I'm not going to accept your behavior. Loving an addict is different than loving, somebody who grew up in a great, home with two loving parents, right? I mean, not that can't be one and the same thing, but love takes on a lot of different forms. But at the end of the day, I think that love is it's not selfish. It's giving, and it's being willing to do the hard thing to benefit somebody else.
I think that's a perfect place to end on, Michael. That was a good thing to end on right there. We about an hour and 50 minutes in.
Is that it?
Huh?
Felt like 10 minutes.
Did it really feel like 10 minutes?
This is why we didn't get any work done.
That's probably why. I'm about to say, no, time has flew by, and I do appreciate you coming through. I would love to have you here again, because
I'm still surprised you asked me.
It is crazy, because I told myself this year I'm gonna start doing things outside the norm. So I have been kind of going out more, talking to different people to have them on, because I feel like when you're a person and you have people on who you know close, you pretty much already had conversations millions of times. And especially on a platform where it's like a lot of young urban adults, a lot of the conversation can kind of get put in one area. And I want this to be a platform where you can learn multiple different things from multiple different people. So me having you on somebody who is older, who is knowledgeable in the subject that you do know.
You didn't have to start with older.
But that's true. Like, you are older. Like, it's not a bad thing. You know what I'm saying? But
no, it's not a bad thing.
But you're not one of like a person who's like my same age as a peer.
I value my age more and more every day.
Exactly, and I appreciate talking to somebody older, because the conversation we had on Sunday, I don't have that conversation on a normal basis, and when I do have it, it's normally to myself. It's like normally me asking myself like, why is it like that? So when we started talking about history and like in the Great Pyramids, I was just like, this is something I feel like people really like to talk about, because I have friends who I want to say are older but more mentally advanced. And a lot of times they ask me like, hey, can you talk about this subject or that subject? And you got to have a partner to go back and forth with. And I felt like you was a great person to have on. So
thank you.
I appreciate having you on.
No, I appreciate you giving my craziness a platform. And
we all crazy, man. I'm about to say, I don't think you're crazy. I just think you're more informed than the general person. And sometimes information can be scary.
I mean, I think there's a lot more. I think at the end of the day, we all have a lot more commonality than we realize, and I think that there's so much divide in our country right now because we don't recognize that commonality, and we're not willing to sit down and have conversations like this and just hear people's view and perspective without being triggered, and just accept the fact that like you can be you and I can be me, and we don't have to necessarily agree and have the same values and morals, but we can still respect one another. I think we need more of that, and like, I love our conversations. I love the talks, and, at the end of the day, I think we can all choose to, we can all look back and say, maybe I didn't align myself the way that was expected, but I feel like I did everything that I could and I did it the right way. Or we can just close our eyes and continue to move forward in the standardization of what's happening around us. But I think that if we're ever going to break out of this like cycle that we're in right now, as a society, then we have to start stepping out of line and stop being afraid to have conversations like this and explore the potential of what's out there, and also the potential of, how do we relate to the world around us?
Man, that was beautifully said. I don't know how to end it any better. But I'm gonna end it right here. It's your boy TravTheRealist. Again, please support me any way you can. If you do want more content, subscribe to my Patreon. That's patreon.com/RAC podcast. Or if you want to donate to make this podcast grow, you can go to my CASHAPP, which is the cash symbol, TRAVENMABLE. I will also put all of my social media tags underneath me if you do want to follow me. I appreciate it. Please like, comment, share, and just add to this conversation. If you do like it, comment. If you want more content like this as well, comment so I can know, because I want to bring different avenues, different discussions to this platform. I don't want it to be just about relationships and just about, just everyday things. I want it to be more about what's going on in the world as well. So if you have any topics you want me to hit, let me know. It's your boy TravTheRealist. Remember to always keep it real, especially with yourself. Peace.